Yo, guys, what is up? Max here, Diablo 4 video, and today we're going over an absolutely insane interaction for Lightning Storm. Now, Lightning Storm is what I believe to be probably the Druid's most slept-on skill. I actually pushed it into the high Nightmare tiers last season. It was one of my favorite builds, and I theory crafted this build before the season came out. I didn't want to make a video on it, though, because I wasn't sure if the interaction was actually going to work, and it works really, really well. Yesterday, I got my Tempest Roar, and I was able to put the bones of this build together. We still haven't, done our Paragon board yet. I've still got my landslide Paragon board on. So what I want to show you guys today is more so this interaction and the synergies here and why it's so good. And then I'll probably have an updated build guide once I have my glyphs leveled, the most important glyphs for this build, which are the werewolf glyph that's going to give you more damage while on werewolf, and the fulminate glyph that gives you more lightning damage. I haven't leveled yet, so all of the gameplay that you're seeing is just a fraction of the damage that this build is going to be able to put out, and it is going to be so strong. So today we're going to over everything that you need to know. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. So we're going to start with an overview of what's going on here, and then we'll get into the gear specifics. So we're using a few things all combined together to basically one-shot and explode packs. The synergies here are the synergy between the lightning dancer aspect, that whenever we critically strike, we spawn dancing lightning bolts. These things hit really hard. I'll explain why they're hitting so hard in a second, but just stay with me. So we're spawning tons of lightning bolts whenever we critically strike enemies. We are going to be constantly pulling enemies in while we are in Grizzly Rage. Enemies are going to get pulled towards us. We've got 22 seconds of uptime on this currently. And so during that, enemies constantly get grouped for us. We are using the Pekana Heart. Critically strikes electrically charge enemies for 4 seconds, causing lightning to arc between them. These lightning arcs do not have a distance thing. As long as I critically strike an enemy and there's another critically striked enemy in the vicinity, they will chain lightning damage between them. And we are using the Barber Heart. As soon as we critically strike, all of this damage is stored and then double dips. What is happening with this build is we are activating our Grizzly Rage. Things are getting tightly grouped for us. We call those lightning storms in, and then boom, Pekana Heart is activating. Lightning storm bolts are activating. These are hitting a ton of enemies. These things hit really, really hard. And all of that damage is being stored and double dipped with the Barber Heart. We are going to be critting like crazy, and all of the damage that is coming out of these lightning bolts and this Pekana Heart can critically strike. This stacks up Grizzly Rage very quickly. Even though you're not seeing the damage numbers, Grizzly Rage crit damage still stacks while you are using a Barber Heart. So we're stacking up a ton of critically strike damage. These damages are going to get the crit bonus, like the Pekana Heart, for example, gets the crit damage multiplier of the Grizzly Rage, and also they scale with the fulminate glyph. So the more lightning damage that we're dealing, or the all these little lightning flat damages, this 3,000 lightning damage, this 600 lightning damage, are all also scaling with our damage increases into lightning damage and lightning crit. And when you put this all together, you have a build that you click a button, you click your attack, and you will evaporate groups of enemies. And it just feels so good. And it's also visually very satisfying. I spent maybe 6 hours yesterday just kind of going back and forth between Lightning Storm, which I think is in most people's eyes the worst version of Tornado. Tornado is the better skill. However, Lightning Storm feels so much better this season. The big thing with Lightning Storm is it doesn't have as good single target as Tornado. It just doesn't. The skill doesn't function as well as Tornado functions at fundamentally to kill single targets. However, now we have a Barber Heart, which allows us to store our damage, double dip, and all of that crit damage and all of those things that are happening are going to be getting stored. And this kind of solves Lightning's single target damage. It's still not as good as Tornado, but it's so much better than it was last season, and that was the weakest part of Lightning Storm. So unfortunately, mandatory for this build is the Tempest Roar. Please don't click off the video. I know, I'm sorry. Tempest Roar is what makes this Lightning Storm work so well. If you're not aware of why this helmet is so good, it makes our storm skills, werewolf skills. That means that we can now use our Lightning Storm in Grizzly Rage, which allows us to stack up crit damage with the rampaging werebeast aspect, and it also allows us to poison enemies every time we critically strike. And when an enemy is poisoned, they're going to get envenom. This is going to give us a 60% bonus crit damage multiplier against poisoned enemies. I know that it says a plus there. Trust me, I see it. This is still multiplicative. It's just a typo. They did not shadow nerf Envenom. It's still a 60% multiplicative damage increase for your crit damage against poison enemies. Next up, we're using the Mad Wolf's Glee. Now, obviously, using a quad damage reduction chest piece here would be really nice for survivability. However, I'm just trying to nuke things as hard as possible, and this chest piece just got buffed. If you upgrade this to 5 out of 5 ranks, it actually gives you a +4. It won't display on the chest piece, but it'll give you a +4. When we activate our boots, while Hurricane is active, we get +2 to our ranks of our shape-shifting skills. We are getting Lightning Storm to now 15 out of 5, which is just dumb. It's so much damage for this skill, and so we're basically killing things before they can kill us is kind of our philosophy for survivability right now, and we also heal like crazy. Next up on your gloves, I'm using a Ranks of Lightning Storm. The perfect roll here would be Ranks of Lightning Storm, crit chance, lucky hit chance, and storm skill cooldown reduction. The reason you don't want crit damage here as a roll is because we're going to be getting plenty of crit damage. We'd rather have the cooldown for our storm skills so we can have a better uptime of Hurricane and Cyclone armor. Next up on your pants, you just got to get like quad damage reduction. I have this like armor while in werebear form, which isn't super great, but your pants is really going to be the big survivability. So you got the disobedience. You could also use the damage reduction while shapeshifted. On this would really work. I just have a max roll disobedience on this right now, so I don't really want to take it off. But either the damage reduction while shapeshifted or a disobedience here is going to be really, really nice. As much damage reduction and as much survivability on your pants as you can get. Then we've got our boots. Really important to get spirit cost reduction on boots for a build like this because spirit cost is going to be a hindrance early on, and I'll talk more about that later. Then we've got movement speed after killing an elite, and damage reduction while injured. Then we've got our weapon. Now, my weapon looks really cool. It's actually not very great for this build, as good as it looks. So I've got a vulnerable lightning crit with werewolf crit damage, which all works because obviously now this is a werewolf skill and a lightning skill. And so I'm getting all those crit damage things. The reason you don't want like this much crit damage on a weapon like this is actually because we're stacking up so much crit damage. The difference between having like 700 crit damage and 740 crit damage isn't going to make as much of a difference. For example, I do think I'd probably benefit more from like a willpower roll here on this weapon, but ideally on your weapon, you're looking for vulnerable crit. If you can roll double crit, that's great. Getting like a distant enemy roll or a close damage roll or even a core skill roll would also be really nice. But vulnerable crit willpower is kind of like the real basis for your weapon that you're looking for. And then we're also going to be using the Edge Masters aspect. Now, I was messing around with the like damage while standing still, and that's nice. But I also don't love standing still for like 3 seconds just to make it feel like it's worth to use it. Obviously, there are situations where you are going to be like completely standstill with this build, but we are going to also have like full resource all the time. So this is just another multiplier that doesn't just require us to like stand still and make us feel slower on this build. On our totem, I've got spirit cost reduction, cooldown reduction, and damage reduction while fortified. I just realized that I haven't rolled this lucky hit chance while you have a barrier on off. Ideally, that would be either crit chance or more damage reduction, but the real things you're looking for on your totem are going to be spirit cost and cooldown. Those are the most important things. If you can get crit chance and damage reduction, you've got a perfect god roll totem, which this could hit if I just rolled this lucky hit with barrier off. It's all good, though. Then we get to our jewelry. Now, I am doing something pretty weird right now that I wouldn't advise, but I basically haven't found this roll yet. Your core skills deal increased damage based on your amount of fortify. I just can't find this roll, and I would put this on my amulet if it wasn't a codex roll. Right now, I've got a non-codex roll for this to give me more movement speed and spirit cost reduction, which is really nice. However, spirit cost reduction is actually capping on this build. I didn't know that there was a spirit cost reduction cap, but basically I would be sitting at 100% spirit cost reduction with this build, with this on my amulet. However, I'm only sitting at 78%, which is weird because as you can see, this alone is a 69% spirit cost reduction roll, and I've got spirit cost reduction on my boots and spirit cost reduction on my totem. So please put the core skill damage on with fortify on your amulet. The reason fortify is so good for this build is because while we're in Grizzly Rage, which we are constantly, we are getting a bunch of fortify per second. You're always gaining fortify on this build. On top of that, we're also going to be increasing the amount of fortify we get, and anytime we get hit, we have a chance to fortify. So trust me, the fortify multiplier on your amulet is a great spot for it. Then we've got the Earth and Might key passive, also applies to your storm skills. This allows us to actually juice up our spirit, so we're always going to be getting tons of spirit on this build, which is great with the Edge Masters aspect, and it's going to give us all those guaranteed crits to stack up our Grizzly Rage really fast and proc Barber basically instantaneously on every enemy that we hit. This feels really good. I do plan to do a variation of this build with Nature's Fury and Landslide. That is the build that I made last season. It's called Terravolt. It was very cool. We basically used Landslide procs off of Lightning Storm to give us single target damage, and the Lightning Storm would immobilize for us, and then the Landslides would get the Terror Motes and hit really hard. I do plan to check out a version of that, but I really wanted to try Earth and Might with all of the crits and all of the energy. It just feels really good, especially with the Barber. And then on our last thing, yeah, we got the core skill. Ideally on your ring, this is what I would consider to be a perfect ring. It is crit damage, vulnerable damage, lucky hit chance, and crit chance. The reason you want crit chance on this build is to get your procs rolling of Earth and Might. This is a lucky hit chance for our critical strikes, and we're going to increase that chance if we are doing critical strikes, if we're hitting immobilized and stunned enemies. Earth and Might does have like less use with the Barber Heart because the Barber Heart hurts our lucky strike things, which is why I do plan on checking out Nature's Fury. But just for this first iteration, this 1.0, I just wanted to show you guys what the build looks like with Earth and Might. But it could be really interesting using that Nature's Fury with those landslides, how I did in Season 0. For our Spirit Boons, we've got pretty standard things, except for one major changeup I did. We are going to be using the 10% reduced damage from elites. That is great. We're going to be using Avian Wrath, 30% more crit damage. This is really nice. You could put the crit chance if you're low on crit chance as well, just to get the ball rolling, but crit damage here. I'm also grabbing Bolster. Fortify for 15% of your maximum life when you use a defensive skill. This is really nice because it's going to give us more Fortify, and more Fortify gives us more damage. And on this build, every time we kill an enemy, we reduce the cooldown of Blood Howl. I don't know if you've seen the gameplay for this build, but we kill enemies very quickly. And so we're constantly getting Blood Howl, which is giving us another source of Fortify for this build, which is another source of damage, which is actually like pretty awesome. Calamity to extend the duration of our ultimate, and then Calm Before the Storm. Now, why are you not using Masochistic? Critical strikes with shapeshifting skills have a 75% chance to heal you. This doesn't work as well with the Barber. While an enemy is barbered, all of the hits cannot proc lucky hits, so this isn't working as well, and it's basically getting nullified a lot of the time. However, every time that I consume Spirit with a Nature Magic skill, I am going to heal. So we are going into Circle of Life instead of Masochistic. Trust me, you have enough healing on this build. You're going to heal like crazy because you're going to be spamming lightning everywhere. This is so much better healing now, and then we can actually focus on more survivability and damage rather than using this, and it's not as great with the Barber Heart. And then obviously Calm Before the Storm to reset the cooldown of our Grizzly Rage. For our skill tree, we're going to be using Storm Strike. I grabbed 1 point into Fierce Storm Strike just as another way to make enemies vulnerable. If you're fighting a boss or an elite and they're not vulnerable, you want to maybe be able to make them vulnerable if your exploit glyph runs out. So this is just quality of life. You don't need it. Then we're going Lightning Storm. I messed around with the additional Lightning Storm versus the Immobilize. They're both pretty good. The only issue with the Immobilize is that we're pulling enemies towards us, so immobilizing enemies has a little bit less use, if that makes sense, because the benefit of immobilizing them would be for some of the damage, but also to keep them away from us, so that we could damage them from a distance. But because we're pulling them right to us, this just didn't really do anything, so we're just grabbing the extra lightning hit. Then we've got Wild Impulses for our core skills to deal more damage, more crit chance against close enemies. We are pulling enemies towards us. I would love to put an extra point here, but I just couldn't fit it. More movement speed while we're in our werewolf form. Then we've got Cyclone Armor. Every 10 seconds, we're going to get 30% DR from this skill, which is great. Blood Howl. I do have an extra point into Blood Howl, generates you 20 spirit. This is nice. It's not needed. You could put this 1 point here. However, if you do ever run out of spirit, it's just nice to always have a Blood Howl to give you a little bit of extra kick. Then we've got Nature's Reach, deal distant, increase damage to distant enemies, double this bonus if they're slowed, stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. Distant enemies is anything that isn't in like basic attack range. So this is also really, really nice. And then we're also grabbing our chance to immobilize from electric shock. Whenever we're dealing lightning damage, we do have a chance to immobilize. If enemies are already immobilized, we're going to deal increased lightning damage to them. And we're also grabbing an extra point here for our storm skills, have another chance to make enemies vulnerable. We're going to be benefiting a lot from enemies being vulnerable. You could put some points into Endless Tempest here for slightly increased duration of Hurricane, but I just want to make sure that all the enemies I'm fighting are vulnerable all the time. Then we've got Hurricane with the upgrade that Hurricane makes enemies deal 20% less damage. We're pulling enemies towards us, so this is proccing on everything versus usually on a lightning build, enemies are far away, and so this isn't as big of a use. So actually works really, really nicely with this build. Toxic Claws, we just want enemies to be poisoned. We don't care about the actual poison damage on them. More damage against elites is beautiful. We're going to be healing whenever we're casting our skills. Grizzly Rage is going to fortify us, make us unstoppable. We're increasing the amount of fortify and also give us our chance to, whenever we get hit, to gain more fortify. And then we're using Earth and Might for all of those guaranteed critical strikes, which just feels so, so good on this build. Next up, we have my Paragon board, and my Paragon board is like unbelievably scuffed right now because I'm still kind of specced into my Landslide build. For example, Heightened Malice is a nice node for this build, but it is absolutely not the board that I would go to first with this build. I would go very first board, Lust for Carnage, to get the critical strikes with your werewolf skills, restores 2 spirit. Now, this node is like a must-have for any Storm Wolf build. It isn't working as well this season if you're using the Barber Heart. The reason for that is once you crit an enemy once, all those future crits do not proc Lust for Carnage, so you're getting significantly less spirit sustain than you are normally with this build, which is why I would, if I'm like putting out, I will have like my ideal Paragon board on DPS check, but the first 2 boards that I would prioritize are Lust for Carnage plus Ancestral Guidance to grab these like spirit on kill nodes, which I don't have right now, and give you the increased damage when you deal spirit. These 2 nodes are massive early quality of life for the build, and then I would prioritize grabbing Thunderstruck, which I don't have spec'd right now, which is why I'm saying this build is scuffed right now. And then lastly, like the final thing, I would think about grabbing Heightened Malice. I definitely wouldn't grab it first. But the glyphs we're going to be using, I can talk about. We are going to be using the Exploit glyph. Let me move this out of the way. We're going to be using the Exploit glyph in the first board. I would be putting the Werewolf glyph. You deal more damage while in werewolf form. I would be putting that in the Lust for Carnage board. I do plan on using Fulminate, increased lightning damage. That is going to be a must-have. We're going to still be using Undaunted, increased damage while fortified, damage reduction while fortified. So exploits, and then spirit. Spirit is more crit damage. This is beautiful. And lastly, and the last thing would probably be Earth and Sky. Nature magic skills deal increased damage to crowd controlled or vulnerable enemies. This node in this board, actually, the Heightened Malice board, to get more damage reduction from poisoned enemies and more damage to poisoned enemies was a really nice place. That's where I actually put it on our last build, the last time I made a Lightning Storm build. And yeah, guys, that is going to do it for the guide. I hope you enjoyed kind of a quick rushed video, but I hope I explained the interactions and these synergies well enough that you can understand it. Obviously, not everyone is going to get a Tempest Roar quickly. This could take you quite a while, but when you get there, this is a build that is so much fun to play. It's got so many cool visual effects, and I really do hope you enjoyed the guide. I will catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.